Comrades and friends, I'd like to speak briefly about the CPGB-ML, Red Youth, and why, now, at this point in time, the work we're carrying out is so vitally important with regard to the political situation in Britain and also the wider struggle for progressive solutions to humanity's problems all over the world. When a person is looking around for information, for answers about socialism, about communism, for ideas about how to improve the world that we live in, one is met with a confusing array of interpretations regarding our history and our future. The starting point for much contemporary theorising about how to change the world for the better has been, broadly speaking, the idea that progressives need to, in quotes, start again, that all humanity's attempts so far at building a social system free of oppression and exploitation have failed to achieve the aims they hope to reach. Obviously, living in the shadow cast by the apparent collapse of socialism in the USSR means we live in a situation in which our job as communists is difficult. Over a century of reinforced anti-communist and anti-socialist propaganda exists as a cultural resource which the servants of the ruling class employ constantly in their efforts to warn the inquisitive away from considering socialism as anything but a failed project. The content of this immense archive permeates all aspects of our literature and visual language in the West to the extent that we have a popular culture that is, however subtle it may seem, imbued with an inherently anti-communist outlook. And this resource is not only available to the bourgeois class in Britain, but also the most reactionary elements of the pro-imperialist comprador classes all over the developing world and former socialist states, providing ideological fuel to the often extremely right-wing movements backed by imperialism to oppose popular, progressive governments which lean towards a socialist or an anti-imperialist direction. As we all know, this has created a situation where the imperialist view of history has a great deal of influence when it comes to the way alternatives to our current system are presented.
Un pueblo débil, un pueblo blandengue, un pueblo cobarde, se rinde y vuelve a la esclavitud. Pero un pueblo digno, un pueblo valiente como nosotros no se rinde y no vuelve jamás a la esclavitud.
This brings me to some points I'd like to make about our party and the work we're doing to re-establish a Marxist-Leninist approach to understanding society and the forces which shape its development. When I began trying to make sense of history off my own back in my late 20s, I found myself trying to understand where socialism went wrong, as it were. I was confronted with all the contradictory and confusing explanations that bourgeois culture has to offer. When dealing with the history of the USSR and the history of the communist movement in general, the entirely negative approach towards Joseph Stalin in particular serves effectively to rewrite and obscure the real history of socialist construction in the Soviet Union and enables bourgeois historians to reduce the fact of the Soviet victory over fascism to a battle between two opposing totalitarian states. However, despite the juvenile triumphalism which has characterised the attitude of the main imperialist countries since the 1990s and the heaps of anti-Soviet propaganda which already existed, clear and convincing explanations for what ultimately caused the Soviet Union's end are not available in great numbers in the political section of your local Waterstones, while the Cold War propaganda works of Solzhenitsyn and Robert Conquest usually are. Now, what I found with the CPGB-ML, which I had not found on offer from any other aspect of the left in Britain, was evidence of years and years of gruelling work on the part of its founding members to establish, understand and explain the process by which capitalism was eventually restored on the territory of the world's flagship socialist state. But the point of this work has not been to simply set the record straight for the benefit of the academic historians of the future, but to carry out a much-needed Marxist analysis of the process by which revisionism led to counter-revolution and ultimately to the dissolving of the once great Soviet Union, to scrape away the layers of misinformation and bad journalism so as to allow the younger generation of class-conscious workers to approach the critical questions from a scientific perspective. The work of Red Youth and Al-Qaeda Development Programme is crucial to the process of training young members to apply Marxist-Leninist analysis in their political work. The nature of the imperialist system and of Britain's specific role within it are subjects which, while occasionally given lip service by the broad morass of leftist organisations in Britain, are not appreciated as the absolutely vital linchpin of understanding which must be fully grasped by workers if we're ever going to get rid of capitalism and its rotten system for good. Al-Qaeda courses aim to develop members with the understanding needed to employ Marxism-Leninism properly. The balance of forces in the world is a constantly changing quantity, which requires unceasing attention and analysis if we are to apply ourselves usefully in the struggle against imperialism. And while the liberal-orientated anti-war movement can't but help focus on the emotive and the superficial aspects of conflict and struggle, we need cadres who are capable of understanding the seismic undercurrents which actually cause these eruptions to occur. Only then can we hope to have enough force and volume behind us to adequately mobilise people, and to mobilise with decisive aims beyond simply that of exercising the right to protest. Our party attaches great importance to study, and while others might like to criticise us for placing such value on theoretical work, we believe that an understanding of theory is vital to making the way we approach our practical work yield results. Building a communist party in an imperialist country like Britain has its own particular issues. We often hear bourgeois parliamentarians talking about how Britain needs to live within its means, but this seldom implies removing Britain's ruling class from their position as the overseers of the global money laundering system, which goes by the euphemistic name of the financial sector, as it aids the international bourgeoisie in looting and squandering the wealth and resources of the planet. In order to have a hope of finally breaking apart this country's links in the international chains of exploitation, we need to ensure people fully appreciate the nature of British imperialism and the way it continues to act as a destructive force, often in tandem with the US around the world. Workers must go beyond the aim of installing a mildly left-wing bourgeois government which seeks to shift the economic burdens of capitalist crisis elsewhere. So, while it may be unpopular at present to keep reminding people of the imperialist nature of the Labour Party, as it enjoys its current place dancing seductively under a radical spotlight, it is absolutely crucial to do so. In order to do this effectively, and without alienating and confusing the young and energetic workers and students who aspire to socialist ideals and who take right-wing commentators at face value when they denounce Corbyn as a Marxist, we need our cadres to become fully capable of applying actual Marxist-Leninist theory to anti-imperialist practical work, in order to really demonstrate that there is a difference, and a large one at that, between a social democratic system attempting to soften the shocks of capitalist crisis whilst greasing the wheels of imperialism, importantly, and a socialist, planned economy, which in a way that British workers so far have only dreamed of, can be adjusted to meet the changing needs of a population. We have a lot of work to do. And it's hard work, so please support us in any way that you're able. Thank you, comrades.
Thank you, Rob, for explaining the theoretical and practical work that our party does in so few and so simple words that even I could understand. Thank you.